Hello, I'm Joey Miles, and this section of videos we've been doing is all about one simple question to do with curiosity regarding the finishing sequence of Ashtanga Yoga. So what you're about to watch is my response to an interview clip with Stu on that question and where that led, and then a sequence of little practical demonstrations of useful things and tips to look out for the alignment, principally in shoulder stand and headstand, but also some other variations for the fish pose and so on. So I hope you enjoy these video clips. That's what to expect.
Hey, this is Stu for, I was going to say for Love Yoga Anatomy, and it's not, so we start again. Hey, this is Stu, and of course I'm here at the beautiful Purple Valley, and I'm here with Joey Miles. And actually this is a question given to us by one of our friends and a viewer, Christina. So if you're listening, Christina, thanks for this. And what she was asking was, and it's sort of been going through my head too, is like a lot of the time in the Ashtanga practice, you do your whole practice, and then when it comes to the finishing sequence, they say, okay, off you go to the back of the room, and you get very little input on the finishing sequence. Yet there's lots of the postures where actually our body's quite vulnerable. So like the headstand, the shoulder stand, our neck, can be in vulnerable positions. So it's really quite important. So we thought, we've got Joey here, who's very much a technician and plenty of knowledge to share and likes to talk. And so we said we'll actually give this to him, and also we're going to have a little demo about the different postures that make up the finishing sequence. And so we'll go straight with that, Joey, as far as, what are the logistics of people going to the back? So there's a reason for it because of space, isn't there? Yeah,
basically, historically in Mysore there was a separate room in Lakshmipuram where people went upstairs to do the finishing sequence, and it made quite a lot of sense, partly because the main room where people practice was so small. And then the other thing energetically is it makes a lot of sense if you're going to be doing the restful poses which wind things down, and then to do a long Shavasana, to do that in a separate space. We haven't got people jumping around or possibly falling on you. That's the logistics of it. And then the other thing is, and this is for me one of the great strengths of self-practice, is when students start coming, I always love to be able to tell them, well, you can come at any time. Yeah. So you don't have to come bang on 6 o'clock, or you can 7 o'clock. So it's very much like going into a restaurant where if the table's free, you take it. So there's a rotation of people. So the rotational aspect in the room makes perfect sense. In my shala in Leeds, people go to the back, and that makes space for the newcomers at the front to come in. So it makes a lot of sense. And in a lot of places, obviously, we go to the back to help people with certain things, or we even keep them at the front when they've never learnt it before to actually teach them the poses, and then send them to the back later on.
Later on.
Yeah. So that's the kind of reason for it, the logistical reason. But in terms of, do people need more instruction? Absolutely. Most people do need more instruction for how to do that. So we'll cover some of that now, I'm sure. Yeah.
And going back to the day in the Mysore days when you used to get sent upstairs, did anybody come up and check you out when you were up there or not? That was it. It was taken that you were given your instruction. You knew what you're doing.
In all my days, I've never had anybody come and look in the finishing room and give me any instruction at all. I mean, of course, there's the lead class days. Yes. But even then, it's like mostly point your feet. But the thing I would argue is, you see, my understanding of the practice, how I learnt it from Patabi, Joyce and Sharat, is they've never been big on a lot of verbal instruction. It's more like a Zen koan. They give you something which is kind of virtually impossible to do, seemingly, and they say, do it. They never really tell you how. I mean, very occasionally you get a little bit of instruction, like point the feet or knees together or something, but virtually never do you really get much verbal instruction. So I would kind of say in answer to this question, it's not relegated to the finishing sequence. It might even be some advanced back. Yeah, for everything. It's very much like do it, but they won't tell you how. It's up to you to work it out, And that's a kind of interesting notion as to should you be spoon-fed or should you be told how to do it and given lots of instruction, which can be really useful, or should you actually work it out yourself through trial and error? And then the other thing is for a lot of these things, not just in yoga, but it could be something like swimming. You often find when people are giving you feedback on, like, they had some coach teach them about how to swim, you often find actually it completely buggers up their perfectly successful technique. Do you see what I mean? So sometimes actually if you don't have a yoga teacher or a swim teacher or whatever it is, if you don't have somebody interfere, you'll find that actually people do it fine. So I mean, I know this is a slight aside, but
it's nice though.
Yeah,
we may want to go swimming in our beautiful pool here.
Yeah, exactly. But there is that aspect. It's like you can do things with a technique that isn't the perfect technique, and yet it works for that person perfectly. I'm thinking of Thelonious Monk playing like piano with his very flat fingers. You know, like all piano teachers would be scratching their head going, you know, how does he make such a good sound? Because he does. He makes this incredible sound, but he's there. You know, it's a really odd kind of technique. And it's the same with so many musicians or practitioners. It's like, it clearly works for them, but it isn't the way that you would sort of guide anybody in.
No, but it's just that we also have that vulnerability of the neck and all that
On all
sort of
teacher
stuff.
trainings, there's always exam questions. So one of the classic questions is, what are the most vulnerable areas? And we all kind of know as yoga teachers, it's kind of like neck, knees, lower back, shoulders. But neck is high up there. So so people absolutely need instruction. And it's one of the things we do in the afternoons here a lot. We look specifically at how do we keep the shoulder girdle in position, and also how not to overwork the musculature in the neck when we do shoulder stand. And then again in Shirshasana, there's clear movements that you can do when you look at a room as a yoga teacher. If I just ask people to raise their arm, you can see very quickly across a room of 20 people, most people, you know, not necessarily most yoga practitioners, but most people generally, you ask them to do this, their arm sort of stops somewhere there. Yeah. And you think,
the ribcage pops out.
Yeah, and not just that, but then you think, well, it's not appropriate for you to do Shirshasana.
Yeah.
So at that point, modifications come in, you know, or alternatives come in, or separate work, you know, specifically for the shoulder girdles kind of comes in, you know. So, you know, basic postures, Gomukhasana arms, Garudasana arms, Parvatasana arms, these basic things that we're always covering. Yeah. I say we're always covering. If you're slightly non-traditional like myself, I'm always endlessly covering. So a lot of the time I'm giving people separate shoulder exercises to work on to gain the mobility. And then, not to mention that, the other prerequisite I'll always have is I won't let people learn the finishing sequence until they've got a modicum of strength and understanding of how to control the body. Because if somebody's just not got the strength and the awareness of how to position the body in basic standing postures, then there's no way they're going to be able to do it whilst upside down.
Yeah. And then that's something really important, isn't it? That I think a lot of people do these things far too soon when they've only just started the practice, and they want to do headstand and that. It's like, hold on a minute.
And then people are running as well to do the 3-point headstand as an alternative because they can't do this probably because of the tightness here in the triceps and the lats and so on. And it's like, it's an absolute no. I mean, most of my students who come in who are fairly normal, by which I mean they might be fairly stiff and they haven't done lots of other forms of yoga practice or movement practice. Most of them I'm just getting to do about half primary series, do a very alternative finishing sequence. So that might be like Setu Bandhasana on a brick to work the shoulder girdle correctly. Some exercises to do, like I say, shoulder stretches, or possibly that kind of dolphin type pose as a prerequisite for headstand. And then that's it. And then about a year later, or 6 months later, depending on people's sort of commitment to the practice, what happens when. And again, people often ask this question: how long is it going to take? But classic answer is, how long's a piece of string? There's no answer.
And what skills they're coming with, they're arriving with.
Exactly.
It's also different.
So it's a great question as to what you should do. But there's definite prerequisites that you need to be able to do before you should safely go up and be doing headstand, shoulders.
And so let's say that we've got those prerequisites to do it. Why are we doing it? What are the benefits that we're getting from the headstand, from the shoulder stand, considering that there is a certain amount of vulnerability?
Sure.
What is it giving us?
My understanding, which is perhaps limited, but my understanding is basically we get this joyful, and it is genuinely joyful and complete shift in perspective, whereby as we turn the body upside down, all the different fluids in the body, the blood is the obvious one, but lymph would be another. They all start to go the opposite direction. So obviously gravity is here in exerting a force on us, and the most obvious way we counteract that is by just lying down flat. When we lie down flat for hopefully 8 hours every night, the equilibrium comes back to the body. But in terms of how do we make that happen in a sort of faster way, how do we recoup the body, we tip the body upside down. Now, in English, we have the expression, my granny would have said to me, come in, she'll put the kettle on, put your feet up, love. That's what she'd have said to me.
That's true.
But it's like, literally, we put our feet up, we get more horizontal, and it's like, it makes us relax. Now, when we take that the other way around, and either we put the legs up the wall, or for those of us who are actually strong enough to do it, we actually go upside down a lot, it has incredible kind of rejuvenating benefits. Now, the thing is, to actually understand or to experience those benefits, I do think you need to be upside down for quite a long time. When I say a long time, I mean in the beginning, maybe 5 minutes. Right. Now, this is another thing which stylistically is very different. We never hold shoulder stand and headstand for that long in the Ashtanga sequence. So although, and I've heard great discussions with sort of teachers like Adil Palkivala from the Iyengar side, and then kind of Richard Freeman from the Ashtanga side, saying, well, the one key difference between these two schools of Iyengar and Ashtanga is in Iyengar yoga they're holding headstand for sort of 5-10 minutes, shoulder stand again like a good 5-7 minutes more longer, whereas we're always up there for, you know, a minute tops.
Yeah.
You know, if you time how Shirak counts us through it, he counts to 10. It's never more than a minute in shoulder stand. We're out of it. Right. It may be more like 2 or 3 minutes in a long time in headstand, but it's just not that long.
Yeah.
So that's another kind of key difference, a really key difference, and that's why when we start getting into the alignment, you're going to get much, or I would argue, you're going to get much more thorough alignment instruction, like real, like, you know, cutting a knife edge alignment detail from the Iyengar lot. Yeah. That's where I got my, you know, most instruction from. I mean, they laughed at me something silly when I first would come and do inversions. They were like, what are you doing? You know, you can't control the pelvis, you're not controlling the thigh, you're not controlling the major parts of the body. And yet there I was, you know, like struggling away to hold a headstand for 5 minutes at a time. And of course, they just take you straight to the wall. Yeah. By taking you to the wall, you're not worried you're going to fall over. When you receive these instructions about rotating the thigh bones in, drawing the coccyx to the heels, or whatever it happens to be, even little things like I remember my teacher used to cover one eye and then cover the other eye. Because sometimes even something like the fact that you're using one eye more suddenly makes you lean on one shoulder more.
Yeah, or twist a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. It's like if I'm looking at you in this particular way here, just to see, then actually that's going to change everything. Obviously.
I think actually, even as you're looking at me weird, I feel myself twisting.
Yeah. But do you see what I mean? So there's so many principles at play that is going to change the way you do the pose. Yeah. So those kind of, you know, real technician details, they come from people trying to stay up there for much, much longer. And definitely in their school, in the Iyengar school, they're always obsessed with you're upside down for a long time. The blood goes to the head, to the brain. This is, you know, rejuvenating in many, many ways.
Do you think we can actually stay upside down for that length and also at the same time keep the weight off of the compressional factors in the cervical spine? Because I say to some people, I say, okay, let's just test how strong you are. How long can you hold yourself off of the floor?
Off your head,
off your head.
With your head hovering,
and it's normally between 5 and 10 breaths.
Right.
So if that's all they can hold, then if you're up there for 5 minutes, you're going to be sinking into... you're going to be taking more weight in your head than you think. When you're doing the first 10 breaths.
Well, sure, but again, this is where, like, in the tradition of Patabi, Joyce and Sharat, they're like, you don't put weight on the head. That's what they say. But actually, whenever you're there for a longer time, you do put weight on the head.
It, aren't you?
Well, I don't think you necessarily sink into it, but this is where we talked about this before. It's like, if the rest of the body is actually strong through the whole body, and actually, if you actually find good, correct balance, then, I mean, I definitely put weight on my head, undoubtedly. There's weight on the head, and it feels absolutely fine on the neck. But if I'm going to be upside down in headstand for a long, long time, then I'll either be at the wall, okay, or preferably I'd actually be on ropes. You know, by being on the rope wall in the Iyengar system, then you're upside down for much longer. But then it's a completely different kind of thing, because you don't have weight, you're not weight bearing, and also you've got the traction through the spine. So that completely changes things. Yeah.
And then as well, when we think of the shoulder stand, you know, how
upright
because of that neck at 45 degrees.
Yeah, so again, so I'm being distracted by the thing. So with shoulder stand, my argument is if you're not on props, if you're flat on the floor, you just don't hold it for very long. Yeah. And also, when you're flat on the floor, you don't try to be completely vertical, because it's too much on the cervical spine. It's too much
just
on
explain
the
to people, because they might, if they're not used to the Iyengar way of using the blankets, what you mean by that.
So basically, in the Iyengar system, they make a pad, either by folding up like between 6 and 10 blankets, so you've got a pad this thick off the floor, okay? Or the other classic method is you just put 4 foam blocks together and then a blanket on top, or fold your mat over the top, and again you end up with this pad like this. Now that doesn't sound or look like very much, but actually in terms of the angling of the neck, it makes quite a dramatic difference as to how then the weight is. And what this does mainly is it takes weight to this section of the arm, so the upper arm bone here and this section here, okay, and the neck feels much, much freer. And instead of being at this angle with the chin right down, you're more like that. So this part will be softer. You can see even here, my neck here, compared to it becomes more stretched. So the scalenes and so on, they start to end up gripping if you're doing this too much for a long period of time. So it's worth mentioning as well, because I find a lot of Ashtanga students are surprised by this, but when I've had the instruction from the Iyengar lot, and I know they do this for many things, but specifically for shoulder stand, they're very like, hey, cut out that breathing with sound as well.
Yeah.
So when we breathe with sound, often there's a little bit of residual tension, not only, you know, from the glottis, but in the muscles around the neck.
Yeah.
Because we want the muscles to actually be soft, we cut the breathing with sound. And the other thing, on an energetic level, when we breathe with sound, it's very much udanic. So ujjayi and udanic, it's got this same root word, up. So it creates this sort of upward flying energy, which is great for early morning practice. It's great when you're cold and you're trying to generate heat. It's great for the beginning of your practice when you're trying to get the circulation up. But at the end, and again about what's the overall effect of the practice, there's very much this sense of equilibrium coming or settling down. You know, if you imagine a jar of water and it's got sand in it or something, and we've shaken it all up, you know, it's a metaphor for the whole body, basically. We want there to be that settling, so the liquid becomes clear, the perception becomes clearer, calmer again. So at the end of practice, we are looking for this sense of settling, and then to add this breath, which energetically from the inside is going like a volcano again. This is just counterproductive. So actually, a lot of the time, I have to remind myself, because for over an hour I've been breathing sound, sound, sound. I get to shoulder stand, it's like, okay, just drop that now. Just go into much more kind of deep relaxation of jaw, tongue, neck, the skin, and let it wind down now. Less of the kind of doing, more of the like, oh, okay, settle. So that's something which...
That's something we don't,
That's something we don't often hear much unless we've kind of come from that kind of slight Iyengar background.
And what is the teachings in Mysore? Do they ever mention that?
They mention it quite a lot, because sometimes naturally people do. That's the interesting thing. I think people naturally sort of let it quieten down. The teaching, I mean, it's very minimal, but the teaching is, hey, breathe with sound. They literally like keep the breathing with sound going.
Right.
So that's the instruction you get over there. Okay. So I'm being somewhat blasphemous.
You're gonna be burnt at the stake.
Yeah,
I
realise. Yeah. I'm basically a heretic. It's just going to be
being
in go is quite appropriate.
We'll get all the grisly details.
Put me up on the cross now.
Exactly, yeah. So the other things, part of that same shoulder sequence is Halasana.
Yeah.
And then also the Urdhva Padmasana.
Yeah.
They're people that have difficulty with Padmasana, I think, can put vulnerability in their knees because you haven't got the same thing. And then Halasana with the shorter hamstrings if you take too much weight in your neck. So without me answering all your questions.
So basically, the main thing is obviously if somebody's got stiff hamstrings, when we take them up into shoulder stand, we need to come up with some solution for them taking the feet down. Yeah. And they won't be taking the feet to the floor. Even if they bend the knees, you know, somebody who's like this, there's not a chance that they're going to get their feet anywhere near the floor, especially without putting a lot of pressure on the neck, which wouldn't be good. So mostly we just place the mat like this. I'm just a big fan of the wall. So the head would be here, we go over, and we put the feet to the wall to begin with here. You can use a chair or something, but the wall is generally the simplest thing, because then any height is fine. You press the feet to the wall.
Because it's nice to have something, because if they're just hanging in the air, isn't it? Then you have that temptation to take them down, because you want some stability.
Exactly, you need the stability there. So going back and using the wall is the simplest. There's other methods I'll show you in a moment when we do the sort of technical class of actually walking the feet up the wall to begin with as well. So there's lots of like very obvious solutions and alternatives. They're not the classic thing that's done in Mysore, but when you're working with sort of what you might call like normal people with a normal range of motion at beginning yoga, this is kind of the solution we tend to use. Just pull them over to the wall to start working on these.
And when we roll down out of that Padmasana and we lay down on the floor, something I'm always interested in is, for a lot of people, the legs don't go down. So we're still in Padmasana, and before we do the next one, you sort of meant to lay them flat, aren't you? And then you arch your back and take hold.
Yeah.
Do you do that? I do that.
Yeah, I don't have a huge amount to add on that one, really. I mean, there's a great neglect of opening this part of the front body and hip flexors in the Ashtanga. In general, in the primary series. So you can put emphasis on it there, and yet most people don't. They just sort of hurry through that movement. And again, if we just go back there a little bit, something that to me is much more sort of vital that people understand is the foundation. So just what's on the floor when it comes to shoulder stand, Halasana, Kanapidasana.
Yeah.
For my understanding of it, it's quite different in those three poses. So those three poses, the foundation's the same. But when we go to the one you mentioned, which is Urdhva Padmasana, and then specifically Pindasana, you cannot maintain the same foundation. No. I think that's impossible. Yeah. And for me, a large part of what I teach when I do a shoulder stand workshop is teaching what is the ideal foundation. You might not be able to do it for the first three, okay? And then what is a different foundation for the next two? Because in my mind, you very much roll from this point on the top of the shoulders and the upper arms, back of the head's on the floor, but there's very little weight, and the cervical spine C7 should be lifted, whereas you don't necessarily maintain the lift. You won't be able to really maintain the lift once you start curling into a ball. So there's a movement you have to do where you basically roll a bit to the front of your mat, and then, so if my shoulders are doing this movement strongly in the first three, by the time I've got my arms around, that's not going to happen. So I've done this shape. So I have to roll more to the upper back to stay off my neck, essentially. So once people understand that, it's kind of straightforward to do. But again, you would never necessarily get that instruction if you're sent to the back of the room.
Yes,
so that's kind of a vital thing.
Some people actually almost do the opposite, don't they?
A lot of people go right
onto their head in order to get that balance.
Yes. That happens. That happens plenty. Yeah. There's one other movement which, for students who are mobile, in the Padmasana really helps, which is you do something which is a bit counterintuitive. So we've got the legs in a lotus. Obviously, it looks like the arms are straight, we're lifting the knees up. Actually, if we push the knees down into the hands, that can create a movement where essentially this is happening to the shoulder. Yes. So as that pushes down, that actually lifts that part of the neck up that little bit, which can be played with.
Okay. And it gives gives a whole like a firmness to the whole thing.
Yeah, it gives a sense of connectivity, because a lot of the time people are very wobbly in that part. As to whether or not people are in lotus or not, it's kind of arbitrary. The main thing is when the legs are straight up, and even when the legs are in Halasana, the legs have to be very, very active to create a lightness in the spine. But in Karna Pidasana, there's total relaxation of the legs when the knees are bent. And then in the Padmasana, again, you've got total relaxation of the legs. It's really a rest from keeping the legs straight and super active. So that's that kind of big difference there. Rolling down into fish pose is a really interesting part that we looked at. I'm not entirely sure I have a lot to add about that transition you just mentioned. But what I find is now, again, with students who are just sort of arching back, putting the neck back, for a lot of students, there's either issues in the neck or after that movement, they can't suddenly take the head and the neck back safely. It just doesn't feel good for them. It would be the same, perhaps, analogy as if some people have done a really deep back bend, they can't go straight into forward bend. So if you think about what you've just done in the cervical spine with the neck, you've done this movement, and to suddenly go from flexion to extension, that doesn't always happen so easily for some people. So there's alternatives we can do, which mostly, I tend to use bricks these days to create lift in the chest, support the head and the neck. And then what I find is students, it's quite different to the classic Matsyasana, but you'll find actually they stay there quite happily for 5 minutes. And actually, in terms of going back to the overall kind of intention, what was the intention in this sequence anyway? Exactly. The intention is to feel like actually now I'm holding everything longer. If you look at, let's say, the rhythm is breath movement, breath movement, breath movement, 5 breaths. Breath movement, breath movement. That's sun salutation. Yeah. Then we've got this steadier rhythm in the standing poses, 5 breaths, a movement, 5 breaths, a movement, possibly a movement or two, 5 breaths. And then again, you've got the movement pause through the sequence. When you now get to the finishing sequence, you've got virtually, well, there is no vinyasa really. There's no jumping around, virtually none. So we've got 25 breaths or 10 breaths minimum. You've actually got this kind of double time. So you are getting this shift in rhythm where stillness can happen and sort of descending in the inner body can happen when we talked about the fluid descending. And with that, completely changes things because you've got more time to notice what's going on. And for me, the best thing can happen at that point is I almost stop counting breaths and I'm just comfortable there for a while. And I lose track of time. A few minutes go by, I go on to the next part, there's a settling. So there's not this constant sort of agitation of movement. So you have to ask yourself, if you're counting 6, 7, 8, and you're desperate to get to the next bit, is that really necessarily going to be doing what we need to do at this point, which is hopefully creating this very sort of settled space so that you're perfectly there for sitting. And again, it's not 10 quick breaths sitting, but now I'm sitting still, observing energetic movements in the body. calming the mind, getting ready to then go into that's the word I love that one of my teachers uses. He uses the word resorption.
Yeah.
So there's this sense of like, actually, you've been generating energy through movement practice, through sheer concentration, and then there's a time when you could soak that energy up, you could soak the benefit up, and ideally, that's what one of the things the finishing sequence is doing. It's leaving us in this very open, receptive space where the logical mind is gone, and yet actually everything else in the body starts to sort of knit back together in this new groove. Because we're literally trying to change the body. We're changing the body, we're changing the mind, we're changing the way we perceive everything around us through this practice. The practice is designed to change us, to transform us. And actually, if we can then give ourselves that receptive space, my belief is, hopefully the practice hasn't ripped us apart. But if it has a little bit, there's that space to literally reintegrate everything. It's like cooking when you've mixed all these ingredients together and you go put it in the freezer or the fridge, you let it set. So there is this resettling, this resetting of the whole body mind. And if we hurry that, if we've just mixed everything together and we don't give it time to settle, it's like that classic analogy. I mean, I've cooked to you before. Yeah. Sometimes the curry, it's better the next day because they've all been in the pot. All those ingredients, they've really somehow gone together. Sometimes I've cooked and then we eat the food, straight away because we're hungry, in our case. But then sometimes it hasn't really merged, and I know it's a bit of a sort of naff metaphor, but for me that's actually quite an effective metaphor for what's happening at the end of the practice. We're getting to a place through the finishing sequence to then end up in Shavasana, and hopefully we're in Shavasana for, again, 20 minutes. So while we're on this theme of the finishing sequence, my probably biggest bugbear, both in my own sort of practice but with students, is we need longer for Shavasana. Yeah. It's essential. Now, I know in my sort of the current standard is to count to 5 and then say, hey, go home and take rest. But it's like, actually, if you don't do Shavasana for a good length of time, in my experience, I walk away feeling a bit frazzled or potentially agitated in some way.
And it isn't the same if you leave a gap and then you do it later, is
no,
it?
It's just not the same.
It needs to be done then and there.
Yeah, it needs to be done then and there. It's like, there's so many metaphors that you could use, but it's like, it's essential. It's absolutely the most essential part of the practice. I would rather cut my practice short and do half primary, do a proper finishing sequence, and give myself 15 minutes in Shavasana than only get 3 minutes in Shavasana. If I have 3 minutes in Shavasana, I would totally not go down that route. And I know many people in a hurry, and I know a lot of people don't find it easy to settle. But there's so many techniques of either putting weight on the body, that could be several blankets, or literally sandbags on the body, covering the eyes. There's so many ways to make yourself settle. You can do Shavasana with the feet against the wall, can be more grounded for some people. Like while we're on the tone of finishing sequence, although we want to jump to the interesting anatomical bits of shoulder stand and headstand, the Shavasana is probably the most important bit. So for students who aren't in a place where they can do it safely, or maybe they are working towards it but it's not really happening, then actually legs up the wall, 10 minutes, Shavasana, 15 minutes. That's a 25-minute finishing sequence, and it's going to put you in a completely different space. And you're going to probably get all the benefits of fluid in the legs, going down, pooling around the pelvis where all the organs are, and making you settle. And then, the final relaxation. And then you've done it. You've got your effect, which you're looking for, which is to feel rejuvenated. We all know a half-hour nap is kind of what we need in the afternoon. There you go, it's done. Legs up the wall, Shavasana, done, job done.
But actually, there is a difference. While you mentioned the word nap, there is a difference, isn't there? Shavasana is an active relaxation.
Of course.
And a lot of us, me included...
we just start snoring.
We drift off, And so... what is the trick to keeping it an active relaxation as against just, okay, now I've done my hard work, now I just have to chill out?
If you want my honest answer, the trick is get enough sleep.
Right.
I mean, I know it sounds like it's what your mum would tell you, isn't it? Put a nice warm coat on before you go outside. But it's true. It's like, if you get enough sleep, so you've had 8 hours in bed, you go do your yoga practice the next day. Also, if you practice so that you're not thoroughly exhausted by the end of the practice. Now, that's a key. Because if you're learning a new section of the, whatever it is, primary series, second series, if you're learning a new section, it's probably going to exhaust you. and then when you do your Shavasana, you probably will fall asleep. Nothing wrong with that. But once you've got assimilated to the practice, if you're still just conking out in Shavasana, the answer is you're probably not sleeping enough. Yeah. And in most of our societies and cultures now, either we're not getting enough hours in bed, or we're still looking at interviews like this on bloody YouTube just before we fall asleep.
These are the exception. You're allowed to watch these.
But seriously, it's like, actually, what are you doing to get enough sleep? What are you doing? I mean, I have it now. It's like, okay, I really won't bring technology to the bedroom. I won't put the phone. I used to have my phone on the alarm. I don't have it now. I got rid of the smartphone. So that actually, I'm not looking at that screen just before bed. And actually, if you get enough sleep, then you don't have to do anything. You lie there, you relax the body. Part of the mind definitely switches off, but it's not the same as sleep. You know the difference, definitely. There's so many different techniques certain people use, certain concentration techniques, counting, body scanning, yoga nidra type activity to give yourself almost like meditation instruction whilst in Shavasana. But ultimately, all the techniques I think can be dropped. You can just put a timer on. For most people that struggle with Shavasana, I'm like, okay, use your timer, like can be on the phone or whatever it is. Put the timer on in the beginning, 10 minutes, and actually learn to just relax for 10 minutes. And then that's that. Once you've done it with the timer a whole bunch of times, you'll find normally, always at that moment, oh, okay, it's weird, there's a sort of internal clock somehow. You just know. It's like, oh, okay, that's it. So both in my sitting meditation practice and so on, normally I find myself going, that's half an hour, I just know. I don't know. I have no idea how, but I just know. So it's the same as Shavasana. I do Shavasana, come up, oh, it's been 20 minutes. But the exception to that rule is when I haven't had enough sleep, which is perfectly common. And then it's just like, it's a different thing.
If we hop back, because I know we want to have time to actually look at the technical stuff of this, but we just hop back to headstand.
Yeah.
Is there anything particular? I know we'll probably talk about the hand position and that in the headstand. But is there anything particular that you want to mention at this stage about things for people to look out for, or whether they should be doing it even?
Yeah, I mean, the main thing for should you be doing it is when you raise the arm up, okay? Are you actually keeping the front ribs down, and is the arm being upright? Okay. The other thing, obviously, is is the upper trapezius coming right up here, and do you feel jammed up in the neck? And I mean, I always refer to these as the donkey work postures, but actually, I'm endlessly asking people to work the Parvatasana arms, this kind of movement, because actually the stiffness that's generated here, for most of us, it's pretty profound to get over. So that's the very obvious movement to look at, those poses there, and actually doing them with repetitions, the Gomukhasana arms, so that actually we've got this sense of creating a vertical line. If I look at this angle here and it's closed, I know that we're going to be severely limited, or there's going to be some compensatory movement probably in the lumbar, which some people can get away with a little bit, but normally that's not happening. The other thing, which is, it's such an obvious thing, but it's the first thing I sort of look for, is are people actually gripping onto their own head? Because a lot of people, they will literally like squeeze their own head. I mean, if we sat here now, squeezing our own head for even a short while, it's a recipe for a headache. Yeah. So, those are the kind of first two things to look at. That's basically it. And then just sheer strength as well. So like you mentioned about lifting the head, I'll normally get people to do some sort of dog pose variation on the forearms with the head clean off the floor and just look to maintain this angle, because if this part of the arm's collapsing forward here, which might be because of stiffness in the triceps like we talk about, but it's possibly also just lack of strength. Yeah. In that case, we just leave people working there. So a lot of students in a counted class, I'll say, okay, go to dolphin pose, go to this kind of headstand variation, keep the head off the floor, and see if you can hold it as everyone else holds it, and we give the count to 10, 15.
And so what sort of time should that finishing sequence take, do you think, as a proportion of the whole practice?
It's a really good question.
Of course.
Yeah.
Who does he think I am?
No, but it is a really good question. So traditionally, it probably takes 15 minutes. Yeah. If primary series is taking an hour and 20 these days, or an hour and a half, it's probably taking 15 minutes. Yeah. So it's not that long. However, I clearly remember working with my sort of senior Iyengar teacher, who was basically saying to me, Joey, he said, how long do you practice for? And I was saying, about 2 hours. And he goes, okay, well, ask yourself this. Are the inversions and your resting part, that should be taking, his argument was 1/3 of the practice.
Okay.
Now that means, if you're doing an hour and a half practice, that's half an hour of being upside down or lying on your back resting, which I think is a really interesting kind of ratio. Now, it can include the resting part, lying down. It doesn't have to be half an hour on your head or on your shoulders. That's, don't interpret it that way. But that means if I'm doing the implication is if I'm regularly doing a 2-hour practice, which is what my practice tends to take, am I actually lying down or upside down for about 40 minutes? Yeah. And my honest answer to that is no, but that's also why I'll often bring in props. So that might be chair, shoulder stand, might be legs up the wall, might be hanging off the ropes to be upside down for longer. Yeah. Then I could answer the question honestly, yeah, I'll be upside down for 40 minutes within the 2 hours. So that's kind of looking at it from slightly at different angles, because you've got the more traditional Ashtanga method, which is quicker. Yeah. And then you've got the, having said it's quicker, it wouldn't be quicker if you did a decent length Shavasana.
Well, yeah, that's true.
You know, if you're upside down doing the finishing sequence for 10-15 minutes, then you did a decent length Shavasana for 10-15 minutes, you've done it right there and then with the 1.5 hour primary series.
And does nowadays, because I lose track of all these things, nowadays in the actual headstand proper sequence, you go up, you hold your 25 breaths or whatever.
Yeah, you come
halfway. But you come all the way to the floor and up 3 times?
No, that's
gone now.
Yeah.
Cost saving or time saving?
I don't know.
Process.
I mean, from my old senior teachers like John Scott, they were always like, oh, okay, do the half bend, now go up and down 3 times. But whenever I went to Mysore, it was never done.
Oh, okay.
And again, although Sharat occasionally instructs lift up, he doesn't tend to instruct that to just a general class.
Okay, because that used to come next, didn't it? After up, down, up, down.
Yeah, you see it in the classic old posters. In Sharat's demonstrations, he does it quite clearly. Yeah. And actually, I have known him come into the finishing room and say to somebody like, "Hey, lift up."
Okay.
You know, so I've known him do that. He's never done it to me personally, but I've seen him in the finishing room saying, "Oh, you come lift up."
It's a good check-in as well to see whether you've got still some strength left. And
it's really interesting. And that would be the other thing that I would mention, just before everybody nails me up on the cross, and I've got another reason to. For me, the simple question I ask myself is, do I have enough energy to do Shirshasana at the end of my practice? Yeah. Now, often the answer is yes, but sometimes if I've practiced in such a way where I feel a bit frazzled, or I just feel like actually I'm not totally centered, you know, maybe I've run out of steam, it's perfectly common, then I won't do Shirshasana at the end. I won't be able to do Shirshasana at the end and then come down and feel centered. So that's a simple question I ask myself, and would encourage students to ask themselves too, because you could just do it and hold it for not so long, but actually if you're feeling like possibly there's some strain in shoulders, neck, it might not be the moment to necessarily do it.
And then right at the end there, just before we lie in Shavasana, we lift up. We're in Padmasana and we lift up for 10 breaths, so we've been calming down. Then we do this sort of super strong, and I remember, is it, what's his face? Oh my God, I've forgotten his name. Whoever, saying that...
Somebody said.
Svensson, was saying that, thanks Rachel, was saying like 50 breaths lift up. And I'm thinking, oh my God, you know. So it's like this superhuman effort to do this just before we lay down. So some people would say, why? We're so calm, now we're doing work, and then we're relaxing again. Why do that there? Why not do it some other time?
I have got no idea. I just have to be honest, I haven't got a bloody clue.
You could make something up, something profound, Joey.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
My honest answer is, I have got no fucking idea. That is just the truth. Oh, excuse my French. Yeah. But there's this simple thing again of it's like a classic method as a teacher when somebody can't relax is you don't just say relax. You don't sort of point, you know, you're not relaxing, relax, you know, that doesn't work. So if somebody's tight in the shoulders, I'll say, okay, bring your shoulders up to your ears, like squeeze. Now relax your shoulders, and you find they actually take their shoulders from this tense place to a more relaxed place from feeling the difference between those two things. So, and it's a classic thing that's done in quite a lot of yoga schools. They lie down for Shavasana, make a fist, tense, now relax.
So you're tensing the body and showing that's tension, now it's relaxation.
That's one method. The logical part of my brain that's looking for some reason before to do Shavasana, you know, would be like, okay, I'm working the whole body in such a way, particularly through the core of the body, the abdomen. That's the part that's really having to squeeze. So there's a sense of sheer effort, and then you let go.
And then you let go.
The other thing that's just worth tiny mentioning is although we call it Shavasana, in Mysore, Guruji says, oh, that's not Shavasana. Shavasana, he says, is in 6th series where you stop the heartbeat. You know, it's one of those, you know, classic, classic stories that we don't really know anything about. You know, but he's like, you're just taking rest.
Right.
So he would say you're taking rest. He'd certainly say, you know, you're not just falling asleep, but take rest. That would be the terminology they use. I think Upruti, this final lift, I think has all sorts of really useful benefit for people to do. The main sense for me of, like, is it physically that challenging? Not really. It's not.
Isn't he trying to hold it for 50? Right.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
and you're not clamping your legs with your arms.
Yeah, but still, compared to everything else you've done, it's, you know, it's not that. The main thing for me is it's like, are you still trying at the end of the practice? So for me, it's more of a sort of little psychological, you know, barrier. Like, is it in the marathon where they've practically done it? They've got to the finish line, and then they have to do some final lap just before they do the last. You know, for me, it's like the final hurdle, isn't it? So it's that thing of, you know, are you still trying now? You know, so I think for me, it represents a bit of a sort of psychological barrier at the end. Of, you know, are you still going for it? Yeah.
Cool. Let's do some stuff.
Okay.
So we'll flip and we'll talk the technical detail.
Okay.
Thanks, Joey.
Thank you. Hello, this is Joey, and following on from the interview I've just done with Stu, we're going to look at some of the prerequisites for shoulder stand of the finishing sequence. So Rachel's here demoing for us, and we're going to just look at the first way I'll introduce the foundational aspect of shoulder stand. Okay, we won't actually do shoulder stand first thing. First we'll do basic bridge pose or Setu Bandha. Okay, so what I asked the student to do is in effortless rest pose here, or constructive rest pose. We've got the legs bent, feet hip distance apart. We're going to try and get onto this part of the upper arm, this part of the shoulder, okay? And the way we have to do that to begin with, okay, is press the heels down, the student lifts the hips up. So off you go. Now from there, okay, what we do is we don't rush immediately to interlacing the fingers, which is how more mobile students tend to do this. We ask the student to hold the side of the mat there, okay? Now, you hold the sides of the mat, both sides. Now from that movement, we now need to spin the upper arms out, okay? Now, when Rachel spins the upper arm out, there's also a movement where we retract the shoulders like this. So you feel the inner edge of the shoulder blades coming together. So that's a contraction at the lower trapezius and the rhomboids to bring this part here in, okay? Now, when that happens, you can, a lot of the time, lean more weight into one shoulder. So go for it, lean weight there, and bring that shoulder in. Then do the same thing on the other side. Yep, that's perfect. Okay, now from here we want to get heavy through the whole upper arm bone, heavy through the elbow joint, and heavy here through the outer wrist. So this whole part here is heavy, and this part's pressing down. Now, if that's happening comfortably, okay, you can then proceed to now interlace the fingers, press the hands down. Okay. Now, if we zoom in this way a little bit, what we want to look at is the neck. Okay. Now, one other little point I'll just continue to make. It's not that important when we're doing this to lift your hips super high, okay? And if you're running out of steam, if the legs are going to get fatigued, you can do this with a brick under the sacrum. But for now, for simplicity, we're looking at it this way. Now, if we zoom in here and we look at the neck, here, my fingers touch here. This area underneath the neck is not on the floor, okay? So the most common mistake people make at this point is they start pressing the chin down to the chest. That does not happen. The chest is lifting up, but the head, if anything, goes slightly back. And then I could take an object like a pen or something if I had one and pass it under the neck here, okay? The other thing, it's going to be harder for you to see, but from this angle, if I put my hand under between the shoulder blades and under here, you'll find the neck is actually not touching the ground, just there and there. It's lifting up, okay? So you want to get a sense that C7, this large section here of the spine, as the curvature goes from the cervical spine to the thoracic spine, that area there, C7T1 is not pressing down, okay? The way to do that is to retract the shoulders more. You can now release down. So just to get clear, okay, you want to feel what is on the ground in this position, okay, before you start to proceed any further on, okay? Now, we're going to cut in a moment and I'll show you a setup for those of you who are a little bit stiffer in the shoulders to make life easier, because many of you in that pose, you'll feel it's all very well, you've understood, but actually you feel this part of the neck is pressing down. So what do? I'll show you that in the next little clip. Okay, so here's the basic setup. We've taken 4 foam blocks and created a pad And then for ease, we've actually put this fifth one here, which is like a launch pad. That means when you're interlacing the fingers, pressing the hands down, this is an even height. It means you won't have your wrists floating off the floor, because we're back to the Setu Bandha. What I have also got here is a couple of folded blankets, just to create something slightly softer here. We want to create a line here, which you need to be slightly meticulous about here, so this is a clean line. The other thing to be a bit meticulous about is that these are folded neatly so that they're not all crumpled up. Otherwise, you feel like you've got something pushing up into your neck. Okay, so Rachel, if you step in, lie down here, feet here. So it's the same shape, it's the same Setu Bandhasana. Okay, now what you need to do when you lie down is start with the head on the ground, on the mat. Okay, and you see how Rachel rolls back until she finds this essentially fairly clean line here between the top of the shoulder, okay, and the edge. So if we look from this side, where Stu's filming from, okay, you can see quite clearly the neck is now really free off. Before I was showing you like here with the fingers, now you can see there's a great big space here, okay. Now from there, okay, walk your heels close into the buttocks, okay, push your heels down, lift your hips up, okay. Go for it, interlace the fingers. You'll see the hands will start pressing down towards the launch pad there, okay? And what Rachel's already doing, without me even instructing her, is she's basically spinning the arms out again and actually putting more weight on one shoulder, then more weight on the other shoulder as she wriggles in, okay? Now this is the best way to initially get used to the setup, okay? Because if you start immediately going up to shoulder stand and you've never really done it before, you'll find you'll actually feel you're probably going to feel less stable than when you just do it on the ground. That's what most people report. So you want to get used to doing this probably fairly regularly, you know, day in, day out for a few weeks before you suddenly start kicking up. That would be my recommendation. The other recommendation would be, okay, if Rachel just brought in a brick there or something to use support here under the pelvis, this type of thing. This is a little bit high for you right now, but you get the idea. You could slide this under the sacrum, okay? Then you can actually stay here for a good 5-10 minutes at a time. And by staying there for longer, you get used to this aspect where the weight is here on the triceps, the weight is here around that top ridge of the shoulder blade. The neck, meanwhile, is completely free. It's off the ground, okay? And then just come down. So that's the initial setup, and I will always ask students to work like this for a matter of weeks or months before they actually proceed much further, okay? We now, though, are going to proceed further. So, Rachel, what I want you to do, raise your legs up, roll your feet back to here for Halasana, okay? Now, walk your feet slightly further back, okay? Now, what we do next, okay, is we have the strap ready. If you just have the strap ready at one side, okay, and we bring this in, okay, the strap is about as wide, okay, as your chest, okay. This one's a little bit stiff. I'm just going to make it a tiny bit narrower. Now this stops, okay, the elbows from now sliding out too wide, okay. Bring your hands onto your back, okay. If we see from this angle, because Rachel's fairly mobile in the shoulder, the fingers point straight up at the hips. For people who are stiffer, okay, it's fine to have the fingers pointing in like this, in at the spine, okay? Now, if you point your fingers up again, that's it. Now, the other thing to mention here, okay, we want the fingers to be lifting this part up, okay? We don't want the back to be just settling back on the hand. So there's a slight sense of, you almost find like a boniness to the fingers there, okay? Walk your feet just an inch or two this way. Just towards your head, walk your feet that way, yeah, pause there. So we're lining up the pelvis with the shoulders, okay? We want to keep a heaviness here at the elbows. We can still see there's this clear big gap here, okay? Now, one leg goes up, then the other, kick up. That's it, straight up, okay? Now, to begin with, okay, I want people to take the feet in the direction of the elbows. So you should just be watching at home. Don't try and do this at the same time as looking at a screen. That should go without saying, okay? And now from here, energize the legs. So really stretch the legs up. Okay, keep breathing freely. Okay, normally we'd hold this for, you know, some length of time, 25 breaths, a few minutes. Okay, what we're going to do for today, though, is just give you the basic instruction of what to do, which is squeeze the legs together, roll the thigh bones in, stretch up not only here through the front of the feet, but stretch up through the heel, so we can see from this angle. Just semi-point the feet, stop there. The feet are semi-pointed, so the Achilles here is long, okay? Now from there, take it down to Halasana. You can go both legs together or one at a time, okay? Now because of the extra height, I want you to stay on the pads of the toes there. This isn't the classical method, but by pushing into the toes there, we now create a sense that the back of the knees here are lifting up, so the front thighs are active, okay? Rachel's interlacing the fingers, pressing them down, that's great. But for those of you who need to support your back, you support the back. Now, one point that's really essential here is this. The lumbar area here, this should be rounded just slightly. This is in flexion. You don't try to extend the lumbar spine in this position, which is a common mistake, okay? You let this round, just like Paschimottanasana, just like your forward bend. Okay. Now the next thing that has to be added here at this point is absolutely essential. Okay. I want you to support your back with your hands, Rachel. That's great. Keep the strap on. Now she's about to go to Karnapidasana. So she's about to bend the knees. When she bends the knees, now that we're on the lift, you do not take your knees to the floor. That's an essential thing that you need to understand if you're trying this on the lift. Okay. So if you now relax your knees, okay, this happens. At this point, when we see from this angle, if anything, I want you to take your hands back a centimetre. Now rest your back more onto your fingers. Yeah, that way, yeah, and stop there. So there's a feeling here, you see the thigh bone starts to rest onto the body. There's a clear feeling of release, and you can see the weight is moving this way slightly, towards the elbows. The neck has absolutely no weight on it at all. There's some weight here at this part, some weight here, but this part, the heavy part in the pelvis is going that way. That's essential. Okay. Now from here, we're basically going to cut, or we're going to show you how to exit the pose, because when we're on the lift, we don't do the next two poses. Okay. We don't do the next two poses. You're not going to go up now and start learning to do lotus on a lift. You just don't do that. So this lift is for the first three. Sarvangasana, Halasana, Karnapidasana. The exit now, if you interlace your fingers, okay. I'm going to remove the strap to make life really easy, but you'll learn to do that yourselves. Okay, and then from there you can release the hands and now start to roll down. Now when you roll down, okay, keep rolling down, rolling down, rolling down. Now just slide this way, all the way, feet to the wall. Okay, I'm going to get rid of the launch pad. Okay, that part there. Again, lie down. Okay, further forward, further forward, further forward. Yeah. Now at this point, okay, you can actually lie with the head and the neck on the support, the shoulders, the arms on the ground. Okay, so when you roll down, you just slide yourself forward. This setup's not perfect because of that ridge, but ideally you'd have that ridge just here. So we've just cut it because I've moved the blankets this way. When you roll down, when we roll down, we got rid of that launch pad, that extra foam block. I've just actually moved here. In an ideal world, you wouldn't need to do that. Okay, but then you can see quite clearly this part of the arm, shoulder is basically right up here. Okay, there's no gap there particularly, and then the neck is supported, head is supported. The whole back here, including the lumbar, is down because the knees are bent. So this is again constructive rest pose or effortless rest pose. That enables you to really relax deeply after holding those previous three poses for longer. Okay, so watch this video several times. If you need to, take a pen and paper, make a few notes of what it is you need to do, and then try it from memory at home. The last thing you want to do is be up in shoulder stand and turning your head or your neck to look at a screen. That's, should go without saying, but it's just a little safety information for you. Okay, so good luck with that. So we're now looking at the shoulder stand and continuing to look at the shoulder stand without any props or support. Okay, so the way I'm going to ask Rachel to do this is essentially to look at the previous setup where the fingers have been interlaced. Okay, and we're going to try to maintain that instead of bringing the hand straight onto the back. Okay, this is looking a little bit at a dome shape of the shoulder stand, so that we lose this sense in our mind that the shoulder stand has to be a perfectly upright vertical shape. Okay, because for most of us it's not. Okay, the other thing this is going to do is it's going to really prioritize where we get the foundation. Okay, and it's also going to make sure that we use the core of the body. So the inner thighs are going to have to squeeze, the abdomen might well have to work perhaps more than you're used to doing this. Okay, so again, watch at home before you do it. Okay, I'll talk Rachel through it. So let's start by just rolling back to Halasana. The hands are apart at this point. Okay, now from here, interlace your fingers like you did previously, press your hands down, wriggle your arms in. Okay, now from here, just check, once again, you can see I'm placing the hand here under the neck. Okay, the neck's not on the ground. Okay, now what I want Rachel to do now, okay, is press down strongly here through the arms. Okay, press down strongly through the hands and the wrists. Okay, don't do both legs together. One leg and then the other follows up and lift up. Okay. Now, she has to squeeze the legs together very strongly. You'll have to squeeze the buttocks slightly. She has to work the abdomen and contract here. She has to still contract strongly here at these muscles between the shoulder blades to lift up. Okay? You can take your feet as upright as you can, okay? But notice from this angle, okay, the feet are pretty much above the face. There may even be an angle more like this. Okay, that's absolutely fine. Okay, so I'm not trying to get people to go perfectly upright at this point. Okay, now from here, without changing the overall shape, and most importantly, without losing the effort of squeezing the legs together, working the abdomen, without losing that, we now keep the elbows together, bring the hands up. Okay, if you notice from this angle, when Rachel just did that, the elbows, they stayed in. Okay, most people, as they do this movement, the hands come up, the elbows go apart, in which case you'll have lost the foundation at the head and the neck. So in that case, you want to just work on that movement separately. So Rachel, can you just interlace your fingers, press your hands down, okay, slowly, okay. Notice this distance here of the elbows, okay. I'm not holding them in particularly, and now again, bring your hands together. This barely moves. So she's really strongly keeping the elbows in. That's vital. If the elbows go out, okay, you've lost it. You'll be on your neck at this point, okay. Now from here, it is okay for Rachel to straighten up a little bit, but it doesn't have to be super vertical, okay? So that's the first part I want you to go ahead and practice, okay? Now from here, what we're going to look at is we pretend we've already done the next two poses, Halasana, Karnapidasana. Start to take your legs into lotus. So one leg slides down, other leg comes in, okay? If necessary, you can use the hands. Okay, an obvious alternative is simply to cross the ankles. Now from there, take your hands to your knees when you're ready, one at a time. Okay, now at this point, the most important thing from this angle we see, okay, is that we're not taking the pelvis too much this way towards the face and the head. It's fine to stay that way, okay? The other thing for more mobile students, we talked about this a little bit in the interviews, we want to start to press the knees down into the hands. That's if you can keep the elbows straight. And when that happens, you should feel more weight on this part of the shoulder. That'll basically free up the cervical spine. Now, here's the most important bit. From Urdhva Padmasana, from this pose, to Pindasana. So slowly, take your knees down, slowly, slowly, okay? Good. Hands hold, it can be like this, can be like this, doesn't matter too much. Now, what I want you to do, Rachel, is try and roll towards the front edge of your mat. Just look, yeah, now you saw that movement, okay? She's not taking this part, the sacrum pelvis, way towards the back of the mat. She's deliberately rolling, do it even more, roll towards my hand, yeah, there. Now, if you do this too much, you'll roll out of it, which won't be injurious, okay? But the most important thing now, you can see it clearly from this side angle camera, the weight is here across the upper back, okay? It's not towards the head and the neck. Okay, so that's the most important thing. People tend to roll too much towards the head and the neck, which is going to be too strenuous on the neck. Now from here, okay, you keep this shape, curled up like a little ball, stretch your arms along the sides of the mat, so hands come forward, okay? Here, you have to do this as slowly as you possibly can, okay? Don't just collapse in a heap at this point. The head stays down, you have to contract the abdomen very strongly, you work the arms as you press the hands down. Go little by little, a couple of inches towards your elbows, pause. Again, a couple of inches, pause. Keep the head down. A couple more inches, pause. This is the really tricky bit, this last bit. A couple more inches, pause. Keep your head down, don't let it lift. Slow it down as slow as you can. Roll down rib by rib by rib. Slowly, slowly, slowly. Keep breathing, work your abdomen. Slowly, slowly, slowly. When you get to the sacrum, again, pause. It's now at this moment when the sacrum's down that you're going to push the elbows down, and in one movement, thighs go forward, head goes back. So it's at that moment, the transitional moment is when the sacrum comes down, okay? Now at this point, she stretches the knees forward, head is pressing back. Now Rachel's showing loads of lift here in the chest. She's looking fairly comfortable in the pose, knees stretch forward. But for many people, that's not going to happen. Now, before we look at the solution to Matsyasana, okay, we'll just go on to Uttana Padasana. So what I want you to do when you're ready is extend the legs forward and up. If you need to reposition the head back, that's fine. Okay, hands point at the feet. This angle is very similar to the Navasana. Okay, hold it slowly, and then whenever you're ready now, just come out and just pause. Back to effortless rest pose. Now the exit, I'm sure you know, is Chakrasana to roll back. We'll explore that in later videos, so you can explore that somewhere else. What I want to show now is for many people, we need to show an alternative for Matsyasana, for fish pose. So I'm going to cut, I'm going to show you the setup, then we'll come back. Rachel's just come down from that shoulder stand sequence we've just done. And I don't know if you can see the coloration, but she's quite pink and red in this area here, which is basically showing the exact right thing. What she was standing on was this part of the arm. Just retract the arm, pull it back again. Yeah, like that. You can see she was standing here. She was standing through here. This part was basically off. What you need to watch out for, and you might have to do this among friends, is that when you come down, you haven't got a great big pink red splotch there, which is perfectly common. I even used to have a build-up of hard skin on that area. You really want to look for that coloration. You can see it it's clearly red, whereas the rest of the skin here is whiter, and so on. If we shield it down, it's whiter. So look for the coloration when you come down, because that clearly shows you what you've been pressing on. Okay, so I just wanted to show you that. Now we'll move on. Okay, so here we are with a setup to show a different Matsyasana variation. Okay, so having rolled down from fish pose, this setup just requires the use of 2 bricks. Okay, the first brick goes pretty high up in the back. Okay, and then the second one's just for the head. So Rachel will just demonstrate now. We position the bricks in the center. Okay, she's in Padmasana, but of course you could be in Sukhasana. You could do a simple cross-leg variation. As she goes back, she reaches back for the second brick to give it support under the skull. Then the arms stretch and hold on to the elbows. If you're stretching the arms straight, okay, the important thing is not to have your arms out to the sides. You should feel proximity, closeness between the upper arms and the ears. Okay. Now you can see here from this side angle, this brick, okay, the edge of the brick there, it's really high up. So this is between the shoulder blades. The mistake people sometimes make is to put it too low down on the rib cage or even down in the lumbar. That's not where it is. It's high up. It's creating lift here at the sternum. Okay, and you can see that. It's also going to create a lot of elasticity here in the diaphragm. We're not taking the head back like Matsyasana. So although I give this as an alternative for people, and it's very, very relaxing, and it's very, very good as preparation for deep breathing, it really is quite different. Okay, we're not taking the spine into extension, the cervical spine, the neck spine into extension. Okay, now Rachel's really mobile, as you can see from the side. Many people, this won't be comfortable in the lower back. So I'm just going to show another simple variation. Rachel, if you just come up, I'm going to bring in 2 foam blocks to Rachel to sit on. Okay, when she sits on the foam blocks, just sit simple cross legs, feet under the knees. Okay, if I add that there for the buttocks. Now what you can see, if you just pause upright, Rach. So from the side, the important thing, it's very obvious really, we've now done the equivalent of cut the brick in half, or thereabouts. Okay, so it's now like we've got smaller bricks, but bricks are generally only made in one shape. Okay, so using the same sort of setup, Rachel, when you're ready, go back. Okay, so she looks back, finds a way. Yeah, go slightly forward. It's fine. It's about right. Good. Yeah, it's there. Now take that brick further back. Yeah. Again, hold the elbows. It's about right. That movement there, where she just slid the top of the buttocks here towards the back of the knees, that's a useful movement so that you don't get compression in the lower back. Now you can see she's still got the lift of the chest. Okay, diaphragm's lower, pelvis is lower, head is virtually level. Okay, however, it's not such an extreme back arch. So for many people, this is a more useful setup. Okay, now what's nice about this is you can hold the pose quite a lot longer. Okay, so you don't need to count for 10 breaths. Just give yourself a few minutes, okay? Let there be this opening and stretch in the armpit, chest and the chest. Let the thigh bones release down. We don't from here go into the Uttana Padasana, the extended leg variation. That's not part of it. This is just a sort of separate pose to wind down after the shoulder stand, okay? So have a look at it several times, then try it at home on your own. Let us know how you get on. Okay, so we're going to be taking a little look at Shirshasana Headstand. Particularly this initial part is the setup we look for beginners. Okay, so the first thing I want you to do, Rachel, is interlace the fingers. Okay, turn the hands, extend the arms forward, have the elbows dead straight. Okay, now from here, when Rachel takes the arms up, we're going to ask her to take the arms up and stop at about a 45-degree angle. So you go up, stop there. Okay, now from here, exhale quite strongly and bring those front ribs down. Okay, keep the front ribs down. From here, we start to take the hands further up and stop again before we take the hands up. Most people, if the hands go all the way above the head, we throw the front ribs forward or we arch the lumbar excessively, yeah, as Rachel's demonstrating there. So we pause at a more kind of conservative place, okay? Then this works through the tension in the deltoids, the triceps, this area of the armpit chest, okay? Bring the hands down. We should normally hold that for considerably longer, but for now you get the idea, okay? Also, the interlace of the finger needs to be changed so the other index finger is on top. Okay. In the beginning, that feels like one of those strange children's games, and it'll confuse you, but it's very straightforward. You just change the interlace. Okay. The other variation we look for is to stretch your right arm up, Gomukhasana arms, left hand behind the back. Okay. Now you can hold. Okay. If there's stiffness there, so you can't hold easily, okay, you can simply hold on to material. You can use a strap, so you can hold a strap with the top hand, lower it into the bottom hand. Okay, do the other side briefly. keep the chin up. Just check as well when you're doing this, if necessary use a mirror, the space between here and here is very minimal, okay? You don't take the elbow across behind the head, but most important, take the elbow, this is what you want to avoid. If you take the elbow out to the side, you won't be stretching this part here, you'll just be going round your stiffness, okay? And then release, okay? So those two poses are the most important prerequisites to work with before we do the Shirshasana. Now we look at the foundation of the Shirshasana. So, Rachel, the first thing I want you to do is hold onto your elbows like this. Okay. Notice essentially the fingers are gripped right around the upper arm bone, so the elbows, they're closer in than you think. Now from here, place the elbows down in front of you. Okay, so that's the way you measure the distance of the elbows. Okay. Now from here, without moving the elbows, interlace your fingers. Now it's very important here the roots of the fingers come together. The fingertips, they lightly touch the back of the hands, but you don't press strongly with the fingertips down because that will indicate that you're gripping onto the head, okay? Now, if we zoom in from this angle potentially, you see there is a gap here between Rachel's hands. It's almost like she's holding a tennis ball there. Now, if you watch, the back of the skull is going to go to this part of the heel of the hand. You can actually open the heel of the hand slightly wider there, okay? So the back of the head is going to go here. It doesn't go right into the center of the palm. Can you see that from here? Yeah? Great. So go for it. Place the head down. Okay? Now it's tricky to see. So again, you see this space here, I can put my hand in there. That would be the foundation of the pose. Now for now, lift your head back up. Now maintain this shape. The other thing to check for is this part here. Okay? So what we want to check for is that this bone, okay, the ulnar bone, the forearm bone here, is sharply pressing down, okay? And the radius on top is stacked. So often what happens, if you just collapse that forward, yeah, you see here the outer wrist has collapsed, okay? That'll be indicative that you're getting too much weight on the head and you're not really maintaining this movement in the forearm. So this has to stay upright, okay? That's a really vital element that we need to look at. Now, maintaining this foundational aspect through the forearm, okay, through the hands, to downward dog like that. So this is the dolphin pose variation. We're now checking, you can let the head hang down, okay? But the head is not on the floor, so there's a big gap here under her head, okay? We now check on the strength. So we've got to have the strength and the mobility. So you can see here this angle is fairly straightforward. So if you just come onto your tiptoes, Rachel, and the pelvis goes up, okay, and then come back towards your heels. Now walk your feet in a few inches, okay? And just keep doing this until you feel like your pelvis is getting to a place that's above the elbow. Okay, so go a little bit more and stop. Now, particularly from this side angle, what we have to watch for now, the arm here, the deltoid is not collapsing forward, just show collapsing forward, there. The collapsing forward of the arm, and particularly the up, keep moving this way, okay? Go onto your tiptoes again. Ideally, when she comes onto the tiptoes, this part of the back here, upper back. Okay, now just hold that for a minute, for 10 breaths, for something that feels manageable for you, and then come down, and again, like normal rest in child's pose, so forehead on the floor, release the arms, that's it, head down, relax, okay? Now, when you're doing that, the best thing you can do is short repetitions. So you hold it for 10 breaths, you come down, you rest for a minute, do it again for 10 breaths, come down and rest, do 3 repetitions. If you're feeling particularly enthusiastic, do 5 repetitions. You don't want to just hold it for one great long time, okay? Otherwise you just end up basically sore. So that's the first stage that you want to work at, okay? Now we'll cut, we'll go to the second stage. Okay, so come up. So, continuing with headstand, once you've done the previous clip and you feel like you're ready to proceed, here's how to go next. Okay, so we do exactly the same setup. She's checking the distance of the elbows, she's positioning the hands nicely, okay? The head now goes down, okay? Now at this point you should not feel too much weight on the head. There's a little bit of weight on the crown of the head or the fontanelle at the front slightly, but you're not putting too much weight there. Now from here go to dog pose, okay, walk in, pause. Now from this point, okay, I don't want you to be lifting up with straight legs, okay? What Rachel's going to do is bend one knee, okay? The heel comes towards the buttock, you keep the knees together, lift up, keep the knees down, keep the thigh bones close to the chest, okay? And then you just wait here. Now at this point you want to maintain a sense of lift here and lift here, okay? So from the upper back and the shoulder, there's a lot of lift. Hold it, count to 5 or 10, and now come down, okay? All the way down, rest in child's pose. You want to practice restraint of learning to go up in that position with the knees bent, okay? And ideally we want to see a difference between the knees bent when the lumbar is in flexion, slightly rounded, and then when the lumbar is in extension, okay? When people go to extension, they normally kick the legs up with lack of control. Okay, so Rachel, if you just demonstrate the difference between the two, from the side angle you'll see very clearly. So once again, go up. What I want you to do is stay in flexion for longer this time. So when your knees go up, don't go into extension too soon. Okay. Round your back more. One knee in, yeah, and the other. Round your back more. There, yeah, there. You need to learn to stay here. With this rounded shape, you'll gather more strength. Now go to extension slightly. Yep, stop. Hold it. Go back to flexion. More rounded, more rounded, more rounded, more rounded. Hold it, and then come down. All the way down. Yeah. So you want to learn to feel the difference between those two movements in the lower back of extension, flexion. Okay. Being in flexion is much, much harder. Okay. But you want to be able to go from flexion to extension. Then the legs are going to go up straight. And when the legs go up straight, you want to do that movement very slowly. So just shuffle back a little bit on your mat, Rach. One last time. Okay. So I want you to pause in all three places. So you're going to pause in flexion, pause in extension. When you take the legs up, do it as slowly as you can. Okay. Keep your feet together. So just observe, same setup we've done already, we've covered. Pause at each and every stage, pause again, keep the lift, okay, keeping the knees bent, yeah, perfect, extend a little, stop. Now, as slow as you can, go up. Good, take the feet back, stop, hold it. Come down with feet together. And come all the way down. So one of the ways Rachel's demonstrating it coming down with straight legs, she's doing that because she's used to the practice of it, which is what we all do. We tend to do it the way we usually do. But if you can, although in the traditional method we go up and down with straight legs, we need to understand it's impossible to go up and down with straight legs if you're not very flexible in the hamstrings. People often mistake this. They think it's a strength issue. It's not a strength issue. It's just to do with the amount of mobility. Now, for those of you who are mobile enough to do it, it's fine. But generally, the reason I always teach it first with bent legs is I presume at this stage that most people haven't got that mobility to do it. So, yeah, so you've seen the method, but ideally you go up with bent knees. Okay, you come down with bent knees. Also notice, you probably know already, but each time Rachel comes down, she stays in child's pose. She keeps the head down. Okay, so that's a really vital element. Okay, you just keep the head down before coming up. Okay, so you've seen those points now. Now we'll move on to look at how to perfect the alignment when we're up. Okay, so here we are still exploring Shirshasana. This time we're looking at the variation against the wall. So the main advantage of being at the wall is we can look at some of the basic actions of how to align the body, and because we're not so concerned now about the balance, we're not going to fall over, the wall gives us some sort of moral support. So we'll check the main details now. So Rachel, interlace the fingers. Okay. Now notice from this side angle, when Rachel does this, the fingers are touching the wall. Okay, they don't press into the wall, but the knuckles there, they touch the wall. Okay, take the head to the hands and pause here. Now, on the way up, it is impossible, even for those of you who can do this with straight legs, it's impossible to do it because normally the pelvis would be further that way. The wall's in the way, so you have to go up one leg at a time. So start to go to dog pose. Notice from this side angle, pause. Notice the upper back here, okay, it's not touching the wall. Okay, take one leg up, then the other. The heels go straight up to the wall and they touch. Now you want the heels to touch the wall, okay? And you want to keep this touching of the heels against the wall. You're not trying to balance. Now also notice from here, in the beginning the buttocks touch the wall, okay? And the movement of the buttocks now away from the wall, it's really small. So tiny movement, stop, okay? At that point, the thigh bones roll in. There's a slight contraction of the buttocks, okay? There's still a strong stretching of the triceps, still a strong lifting here, lifting here. The heels slide up the wall. That's fine, you're doing really well. And then when you're ready, one leg comes down, then the other. Now in the beginning, okay, rest in child's pose. In the beginning, you will be taking a little bit more weight on the head than you're used to doing. That doesn't mean the same action in the arms of the lifting doesn't continue to occur. But what you can do here is you can find that movement of the pelvis, okay, and you can make sure that the body isn't an angle or the lumbar spine isn't, you know, in extreme extension, so that you're not overarching the back. Okay, so that's the basic thing. The common mistake when people use the wall is there's a big gap here between the hands and the wall, which creates a banana shape. That's what you don't want to do. So the clear demonstration just showed fingers touching the wall, heels touching the wall. That creates the line. Okay, so that's how to use the wall in the first method. Okay, so here's one more method which is particularly useful, okay, for making sure that this part, the upper trapezius area, continues to move this way. Okay, so Rachel, if you just do this for me like that. Okay, so when Rachel's doing that position, it may well be that if she's standing here on these bones, it may well be that the head's not on the floor, particularly as we increase this angle here. But now what we're really checking for is that this part continues to flow that way. Okay, so it's going to actually be quite intense for stretching the arms and the shoulders. So we'll have a look. The basic setup you can see here, okay, is we're using 1 brick and then a stack of foam blocks on top. So you can just use 3, but we're using 4 today. You could use as many as 5. This part here, the foam blocks, will be pressing on Rachel's back here. Okay, now Rachel, go for it. So interlace your fingers around the brick. There's a little gap between the brick and the wall, as you can see. She actually grips hold of the brick a bit like it's, you know, the same setup for the head. Now the back of the head, the back of the skull, will go as far as the brick. Okay. Now from there, don't worry if your head isn't on the floor. So that confuses some people. Often the head's a little bit up now because you're having to really work the arms. Now what Rachel does is she'll go to the tiptoes, which she's already done. Okay, and then starts to walk the feet in closer. Now when she walks in closer, it puts more pressure here on the upper back. Okay, and you just hold that there. Now what will happen to you if you've got one shoulder that's stiffer than the other is one elbow will tend to slide out. Be really, really strict on yourself that you don't let the elbows slide out. Now, for now, that's enough. Go onto the tiptoes again. Try and get the pelvis, the bottom directly above the elbows, which she's doing beautifully. Now, that's basically enough. You hold that there, okay? You really let this part open here, okay? And then when you're ready, you come down. Now, if you get used to that, of course it is possible to kick all the way up, but by the time you kick up, the feet will be over here, so there will be more of an arch in the lumbar. So it won't train you to be in a perfectly straight headstand, but it will train you to get this extra movement here and this extra power here in the upper back and the correct directionality. So I work with this a lot in students who collapse the upper back. They're rounding the upper back when they do the movement. So have a look a couple of times, try it at home if you've got the props, and let us know how you get on. Okay, so we talked in the interview about just simply putting your legs up the wall, and then Rachel's just going to simply demonstrate how to do that simply now. You probably don't really need to see, but just in case. So she sat in Bandhasana, basic pose. She's basically kneeling, she's taking the bottom to the side. Now, when she rolls to the side, notice she started off the mat. Okay, now when you're ready, roll over. You'll see she'll just roll to the side. Okay. That method of rolling in means the buttocks are already against the wall and they're touching, okay? That saves you having to sort of shuffle your way in a way that feels a little bit awkward, okay? Now, for Rachel, she's got the buttocks against the wall, the heels against the wall. But for people who are stiffer in the hamstrings, you will have a gap between the bottom and the wall, so there'll be a small gap. But for people who are open in the hamstrings, as Rachel is here, she just does it in this method. So you can wait like this for 5 or 10 minutes at a time. Okay, it's also possible if you now simply cross the legs. Okay, now at this point slide back another inch or 2. Okay, this is now relax. That's it. This is a really useful method for getting a sense deep in the body, deep in the structure of the alignment from the base of the skull to the sacrum. Okay, when I asked her to slide away from the wall, that's simply because of the hips. She'll be more relaxed here at the hip crease now. Okay, change the cross of the legs so the other shin's on top. Okay, crossing the legs is obviously not symmetrical. You'll feel it in the back of the pelvis and the sacrum. You'll have more weight on one side than the other. Okay, don't expect it to be perfectly symmetrical. Okay, but you can explore there the legs up the wall, cross-legged variation. Okay. And that'll be a really good relaxing alternative when you haven't got the muscular energy at the end of the practice to spend a long time working on these different variations of shoulder stand and headstand. Okay, so hope that helps.